Hello. Today we're going to be discussing Princess Mononoke, and we're going to start off with the acting and the script. So what did you guys think about that?
I thought the script was really interesting. I really like Studio Ghibli movies. And so for this one, how he was trying to have it it was like pro environment kind of, but it was also like showing the different nuances of like what is good for like people versus what is good for like the environment, and how like they're not exactly like exclusive, they seem like they would be. So just like the characters he kind of built with that, like to represent those different ideologies.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the script and the fact that a lot of the scenes or the it was based on like Japanese folklore, and you can tell how they like incorporated the traditions into the story. So I really thought that was cool.
Yeah, like even how I had been looking at like the trivia of it afterward, and I had seen this movie before in English, but this time I watched it in Japanese. And in the English version, the wolf is voiced by like a woman, but in the uh, Japanese version, like the mother wolf is voiced by a man. And it was saying in the trivia that like in like Japanese culture, like wolves and dogs are always voiced by men, like regardless of the sex, and like cats are always voiced by women. And so they kept like they had a guy voice the mother wolf. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think the acting in the script like played a big part in the film just because when you look at like what the film is really about and how it's about like the environment and like preserving nature and things like that, I feel like by it being animated in like kind of an anime style, it made it more impactful in a way and a little more like um, able to be visualized and things like that, just because like we see so many movies and like documentaries, but to see it like animated and have those folk and animations included also like just made it all the more impactful.
Yeah, I think like the fact that it was an animation kind of made it more interesting, because I mean it's not very often that we'll have um, movies or stuff that are about the environment that are animated. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like to the extent of which the movie like it was pretty graphic at times. So I don't think that the message would have been portrayed as well if it were like in live action than if it were animated. You could do a lot more in a cartoon than you can in like live action unless you're using like CGI. So I think that the fact that it was animated just really like kind of held the story together and made it like interesting enough where we could understand everything that was going on and the severeness of the situation.
Yeah, I agree. And like I don't know if this is mise en scene or not, but the like how Studio Ghibli is kind of known for like soft animation, like it's kind of like calming, and they make a lot of like children's movies. But then to have this like graphic kind of content in there, it kind of shows how like seriously he takes this issue, and also just having like the blood and gore and like disturbing stuff like up against like this really like ethereal, like beautiful kind of like just soft palette was like I think really impactful. Like I agree.
Okay. I think we said everything about acting and script. We can move on to camera work and editing now. I don't know if this specifically counts as camera work, but I feel like since it's an animated film, it's kind of different. But I really like y'all were saying previously, the fact that it was animated really brought more to the story. And it's like specifically the first scene where he got attacked by like the boar and you could see like the evil spirit coming from it. I thought that was like a really powerful scene.
Yeah, I agree. And like, yeah, I guess this is camera work kind of like even when it's animated, but just like the different shots they had, like the shot of like the night walker when he was walking out. Like I feel like everything they kind of did just really captured like the scale of what it was supposed to be. And like also with the editing, like the way he would kind of have little like premonitions almost of what was going on, and it would like cut these little like flash forward scenes, like or not flash forward, but like little flashes of what was happening somewhere else. And it would just kind of like increase like the anxiety around the scene. And I just kept noticing they were doing stuff like that, like with the like editing to like either having it long shots to like when it's a calm, like peaceful scene, or like really fast, like choppier edits when it was getting more stressful.
And I also paid attention to whenever the demon mark on his arm, whenever it started throbbing, the camera will cut to a close up of his arm and you could see the throbbing. So I feel like the fact that they closed in on his arm just kind of made it more intense, and you can really like see like, oh, his arm is really throbbing, like something's about to happen.
Yeah, and I think like just with anime style films in general, like it's always I don't want to say like an outdated form of animation, but like everything is so much more staccato and like they don't overdo it or overkill with the animation, how I feel like a lot of American movies do. So just in having like those simple edits and like the simple shots with not too much movement and not too much going on in one scene just makes it more easier to concentrate on, I think. And I know that like after looking in the I looked up the movie and it said it took them like over 10 years, I think like 14 years to plan and shoot and come up with the idea of this movie and like produce it and everything. So it's kind of interesting that even though it took that long, like they didn't overkill it and do too much in the camera.
Yeah, like I don't even know how long it took, but I when like I was looking up the trivia, I saw that the director, Miyazaki, I think his name is, it was saying how like he had hand drawn or like gone back and like fixed a bunch of the animation cells, like about like 50% of them, and how this was like the last Studio Ghibli movie I think with animation cells, like that was using that kind of like slower, like kind of choppier, like you were saying, like form of animation, and just how that kind of like contributed to you could just like feel how much like kind of love and like time was invested in the project.
Yeah, I agree because even though it's animated, it was still able to kind of maintain a level of like seriousness and maturity. And I think that's why the movie is so like well loved and popular because it's like you're able to get like the fascinating like entertainment part that comes with animation and being able to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in a live action movie, but it also still maintains like the seriousness of the topic. And I feel like it's one of those things where you can watch whether you're young or old and you can still enjoy it.
I agree.
Okay, if nobody has any last thoughts, we can move on to costumes and missing scene. I think for
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say I think for the costumes, they're pretty self-explanatory and it being like traditional Japanese wear and it's like everything kind of fit in accordance to the scene, like with the lady Iwashi, I think her name was. Like everyone's you can tell the difference between someone like her who's of a higher status versus the workers and what they were wearing.
Yeah, like off of that, like what I thought was kind of interesting about the costumes was like in Irontown, how it was like all the women were working. And it's like women didn't really like they're basically wearing like robes and like scarves and not like they weren't really trying to, you know,
Yeah.
I mean I feel like when you imagine somebody like working in like an iron mining area, like they're kind of in different style clothes, but like in a female dominated environment, it was different.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was kind of because they had on like they were going to bed more than working, and they didn't have shoes or
Exactly.
anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
With the mise en scene though, and like I think that just we kind of already talked about this, but just the way like he incorporated like folklore type characters like to represent a bunch of stuff. Like my one of the things that I thought was really cool was like the I can't remember what they were called, but like the little things that like their heads would shake and they were like the spirits of the trees or whatever. Um, and how they look kind of like creepy, like they look a little bit like they just look kind of creepy, but they kind of reminded me of like cicadas, like the noises they're making and how they're like part of nature, even though they're not really like like if you're just looking at them, they look kind of gross, but like what they're representing is like the life in the trees and like when the deer god died, like how they all died, but then at the very end when like the trees are growing back, like there's one that shows back up. And even like how the deer god looked, like he was kind of unsettling, like his face was really weird. So I kind of like how he didn't try to like make it all like beautiful, like he kind of let the fact that it was nature and that it was representing nature make it more beautiful than like what it looked like itself.
Yeah, I agree. I even noticed that with like the apes in that one scene where they were trying to eat him. It's like they didn't look like regular apes. Like they were kind of like they still look like spirits. Like their eyes were red. I feel like all the like animals in the nature kind of have a different spin to it, which made it different. And this is kind of going back into like the costumes, but I noticed Princess Mononoke, like her her whole attire and like the mask and stuff that she wears kind of symbolize like her distrust, like her, I guess, rejection of her human side. Because she would have like, it kind of looked like she was more of an animal when she had on like the mask and the fur and stuff like that.
For a missing scene, one thing that I noticed was like, of course, the wolf creatures were big and things like that, but it always seems like the surrounding environment was like the majority of the screen. And like the people and the humans seem so much smaller than everything. So I think that just is tying into like the whole overarching theme and plot of the film. And like even the rocks and stars and stuff like that would take up more screen space than the actual people. So that's something I noticed.
Yeah, I didn't really like notice that, like, but that's a really good point. Like the way he kind of, because I feel like a lot of the stuff he was doing was like subtle ways of indicating like the importance of certain things. So like that kind of reminded me of like, and even what you were saying, Zaman, about like the uh way she was dressed, like just the way she was moved was more like animal like than human, and how when there was like the boars that were dead and they were being like worn by the humans and the way they were kind of like slithering on the ground, like just how everything like moving in an unnatural way or like a way different from you expected like created an entirely different like feeling of the scene. So yeah, I think he like built on that really well, just like with a bunch of different like elements.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was it basically all kind of went toward the overall theme of like trying to highlight the two separate worlds of like the environment and humans and how they come together in ways that is kind of an imbalance between the two. Right, and we can move on to music next. What did everybody think? I feel like the part where I've noticed the music most was in the scenes with Princess Mononoke, because I feel like the scenes, like again, it highlighted like the animal nature, and I noticed it got really intense, like whenever she attacked Lady Ivoshe, I keep forgetting her name, but when she attacked her, I noticed the music would always get intense in like her scenes.
Yeah, the music for the most part was kind of like just like kind of just going along with whatever the scene was. But they had this like one little like score, I guess, that was would kind of repeat whenever things were like really like peaceful. Or like it was, I just remember like a few scenes where it had happened and it just kind of like helped tie things together, like just the like consistency in the sounds that he was building, like they really mirrored the like setting and the tone of like the scene, and it would change whenever anything else was happening. And also like with the deer god, like as soon as the deer god would step on screen, like everything would go silent, and how it was like even the little like ambient noises of like the forest in the background would be just like dead. And so I think that kind of helped tie into like the awe that was surrounding this like creature, how it's like it's not about what he looks like, it's about like how he feels and how like the energy that he brings in like feels. And so I think that that really helped like establish his character or its character.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't even really notice until you said that, but in the scenes it did create like an air of like mystery around him, and it kind of spoke to why he was so important, because not only his appearance but like the way the scenes were set up, it would make it to where it's like everything was silent and you could really see his impact on the other characters and like the nature and things like that.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me, like, I don't know, I think this is more like script than this, but like just how the animals and like could all communicate with each other. Like even they're the ones that had like voices, but they were still communicating with like the deer that he had, and like Princess Mon or San was able to like talk to the boar, even though she was speaking like she was speaking. And so I don't know if this was like intentional necessarily, but it just kind of added to like the like idea that there's this connection amongst all of like the natural beings, like in living in the forest, like living in harmony, and how it like kind of transcends like language. Like there's just an understanding there.
Yeah, because I remember I noticed like when Princess Mononoke got rescued by the main character, when I didn't even realize like the wolves and stuff would be talking until she started talking to them. And then I was like, oh wow, I forgot like she could communicate with them just like they could communicate with like the other animals. And then that was adding on to her character and how she like really fought on behalf of the nature.
Yeah.
And if nobody has any last thoughts, we can move on to the total psychological impact of the film.
I feel like we kind of talked about that in every section that we covered, but just to like tie it all up and bring it in, um, like we said earlier, being animated just really intensified everything. Um, like Tiffany said, if it were not animated, then we wouldn't be able to like relate it to the wide scale that I think the directors and screenwriters or whatever intended. But like, since it was, then you can be as dramatic as you want to. And the overarching theme was just to take care of your environment, take care of your community, and like all the violence and stuff wasn't necessary per se, but by adding all of that, um, it just intensified the mood and made the plot, you know, even more heavy. Um, so I feel like that was strategic, of course, by the directors and the filmmakers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I mean I really like this movie. Like I think it was really like beautiful in the way that he had like depicted a lot of it, even though like some of it was kind of ugly, but just the way they kept talking about like the idea that like this world is cursed, like humans are cursed. Like there was this idea of like curses kind of just throughout the entire movie, like especially with the curse that's in his like arm, but just the way like they kept repeating that, like different characters would say like we're cursed or like, you know, we're all cursed to like want to live, but like we can't stop wanting to live. And so it just kind of like felt like he was saying that like this world is kind of cursed. Like humans are always gonna want to like innovate to the point that we're like destroying what's around us, and like we kind of care more about ourselves as like individuals or even like humans as like a collective than like anything else that is being affected by us. And so just how he kind of brought up this like idea of like how when he gets to the town and he sees how like great the town is like for the women and for like the people who were really sick and who had like had no one to kind of listen to them or take care of them before, but like how this like community was really hurting the forest like at large, and how they couldn't seem to like understand that, and how like in the end when they're finally able to kind of reconcile those two things, like it's like the god of like the deer god is like dead at that point, and so they're kind of just trying to like work with what they have now. Like I think that that was kind of an interesting commentary on like how he feels about environmentalism.
And like something that the movie made me realize is like the lengths that people will go to get what they want. Like for example, like it was kind of sad seeing like the warriors like throwing grenades, blowing up hundreds of animals. Like it was kind of sad to see that when in reality the animals were just fighting for their home and to protect their forest. And then for I forgot her name, Milady, that character, she went to such extremes to just kill the deer god. Like it sounds very extreme when you think about it. Everything was just a bit much just to get what they wanted.
Yeah, and that even like sounds like a terrible idea for them to be like, we're gonna kill this god of like life and death. Like,
Exactly.
why would they want to kill that? Like, it's not like such a like pure ego. Like, we're just trying to see that we can and take this head back to the emperor.
Yeah, I agree. I think the messaging was really powerful, and it was kind of telling how it could be so like dark at times, even though it was like animated. And like y'all said previously, it just showed like the selfishness kind of that's in human nature. And it was kind of dark to realize. Like I remember the scene where the man who was sick in the place where they were making like the guns and stuff, and he was saying how life is just full of suffering and pain, and he was just happy that she gave him a chance to like not shun him like everyone else did. And it just showed how like the evil was in like the nature, it was in the humans, it was kind of everywhere. All right, does anybody have any last thoughts before we wrap up? No, okay. Well, that's the end of our podcast, and thank you for listening.